this video, I wanted to introduce you to the concept of shapes within Photoshop. Now, to create shapes, you have a couple of options. First, if you go back to the shapes that you're familiar with based on tools that we've used to date, you know that you likely could create shapes using your elliptical marquee tool or your rectangular marquee tool. In addition, you have some shape tools down here near the bottom on the left side. It may default to the rectangle. Mine defaulted to the ellipse this time. Bottom line, it's below the type tool. And if you do a long press, you're going to see that you have access to a bunch of other shapes. Okay. So going back to the marquee tools, I want to point out first that these are bitmap or resolution dependent shapes. So if I were to create a shape using one of these tools, it will be reliant on whatever number of pixels it was initially created with, okay? So what that means is that I can never make it larger. If I try to make it larger, it will get fuzzy and icky and pixelated and just ugly, okay? However, I like to make sure that you guys know how to do everything in Photoshop, so I'm going to show you how to use this. So again, using my marquee tool, I'll just use the rectangle. I'm going to go ahead and drag out a shape. Okay. Now, last week we used our paint bucket. And so at this point, you know that you can use your paint bucket to fill something with color. Now, my color is set to white, so I'm just going to click on that to get to my color picker. I'm just going to quickly pick a color, and I'll use my paint bucket to fill it. Okay. Again, you'll see that my dancing ants are still there, so I need to get rid of them. So I'll use Command D as in dog, and that is now gone. Now, the problem with this is that I created this shape and it's attached or bound with this background layer. So this shape is not independent of the white background. If I were to grab my move tool and to move it, I'm going to need to unlock the background. So I'll just click on the lock. If I grab that, you're going to see that they move together. Okay, it's one thing. And to undo, you can either go to edit and undo your move. Okay, remember you can always hit Control or Command Z as in zebra. To do this more correctly, okay, I can use the same tool, drag out a shape, but before I fill it, I need to make sure I add a new layer. And so I'll just click to add a layer. Now I have a blank one. I can use the same technique, paint bucket, I'll use the same color, I'll fill it with color, deselect to get rid of the dancing ants. And if I grab my move tool this time, you'll see that these move independently. Okay, this is totally separate from the layer beneath it, and white is not moving with it. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and delete. I'll delete layer 1. Okay, layer 0 is fine. And again, you know, this is absolutely fine to use. I find that I do need to create shapes using the marquee tools from time to time, particularly when I'm sort of hiding something or blending something with a photo. And photos are pixel dependent, okay? And so again, this just happens to be a tool that I find really helpful in that instance, okay? Now, I can come down to my shape tools, and what I want to point out here is that these are vectors, okay? Vectors being mathematical equations that will create my shape, and if I want to make something larger or something smaller, it can absolutely be done because it's not pixel dependent, and it will adjust the mathematical equation to render a beautiful shape no matter the size, okay? So if I come in and use, let's say I'll just use my rectangle, and I click out a shape, okay, you already see that this looks different. Okay, I've got a blue line around. I don't have dancing ants. It automatically filled with color. It automatically put it on its own layer called Rectangle 1. And you'll see the property panel automatically opens. Okay. Now, again, this is a vector. This is not, it's totally pixel independent. It is pixel independent. So I can't use tools that are used with pixels. So I can't use my paint bucket on this. It won't work. I can't come over and make alterations again with any of these tools up here that are pixel dependent. If I want to change the color of this, okay, I can put myself back on my shape tool, and you're going to see that you get a different options bar. All the color will be edited up here. So I can go to fill and I can come in and choose a different color. I can also access what looks like a color picker, or essentially it is a color picker, but it's just not attached to my foreground. And I can change my color that way. I can also add a stroke, which is just a border around my shape. And so if I choose blue and go ahead and change the thickness, 1 pixel is very, very small. I'll go ahead and make that thicker so it's more obvious. Okay, again, so now I have a shape with this sort of coral fill or peach fill, and it's got a pale blue stroke around it. Okay. Now again, it's vector based. It's completely different than the other tools. But because it's vector based, it's really handy for creating things like logos. Okay, most logos are made up of simple shapes. And logos often need to be sized up a great deal for billboards and then sized down very, very small for things like business cards. Okay. Now, as I created these, you saw that I've been dragging. Okay, I dragged out my marquee tool. I dragged out my rectangle shape tool. You can also simply click and you'll get a dialog box that will allow you to put in the dimensions. Okay, this is currently set to pixels, but I can put in, 2 inch by 2 inch, and I can control the number of sides. So do I want a hexagon, a octagon, or do I want a triangle? Okay, so I'll do 3 sides so I can get a triangle, and you'll see that that gets applied to my document. And again, I have this on a separate layer called Polygon 1. Again, I can come in, make some further alterations, maybe on a rounded rectangle. I could click and drag it out, or I could simply click. And again, I have dimensions, but I also have how curved my corners are. Okay, I can affect the radius essentially. So in this instance, maybe I'll change this to 25, 25, 25, 25, and hit OK. And you'll see how different the curves look on these. This one's much more square, and this is much more rounded. Okay. And then finally, when it comes to shapes, students generally really love the custom shape tool more than anything else. If you, again, look at your options bar, all of the options are the same, but now you have this option for shape. And I have a bunch loaded here, so maybe I want to add some sort of grass. I can go ahead and add that. And I did a click and I just accepted, or I can, again, if I'm on that tool, I can drag it out. Okay. Again, I have lots of options here. You're going to see I've got a drop down with even more. I have folders here for other options. If you don't have as many here, I want you to look for your little gear. If you press, you'll see that you can append default shapes. And you can hit OK, and that should add more. Okay. This works a little differently than it did in older versions. It used to give you a folder and you could choose which shapes you wanted to have. It looks like in 2020, they are adding all the shapes in the folders are easily accessible, so you don't have to do the appending that you used to do. And you also see that you have an option for importing shapes. So if you find a cool shape that someone has offered as a download on their website, you can import shapes to this as well. Okay. Now, I've introduced this just to ensure that we have enough content this week, but also as you begin working on project number 2, you may find that you have an idea and you don't know how to create grass, or you want to introduce a camel, or you want a peace sign or something of that nature. You can go out and look for it on the internet. You can try to draw it yourself. But again, if it's a fairly simplistic shape, it probably exists in Photoshop already. And so I'd like to make sure you guys understand that you can use whatever is present to save time on your work.